How are we doing today? Good? Let me tell you something, people. We're not going to do this. You guys need to, I don't know what's going on. Some of you are looking at me like a deer looks into the headlights before it gets hit, okay? So let me just set things into perspective, okay? You guys are Christians, so you believe in the creator of the universe. He's allowed you to live this long. You are in California today. You are not in West Virginia. You're not in Houston. You're not like in some other place. You got to sing songs to the creator of the universe earlier today. You're learning about marriage and family, and you're going to sit there like, when I ask you, how are you doing? I'm going to ask it again. How are we doing today? Good? All right, some of you are still not going to move. You're too cool for that. That's cool. My name is Caleb, and I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Okay. I see we have to have another talk before, and I haven't even begun my talk because of your guys' attitude, so we're going to try this again, okay? Listen, I understand some of you do not like winners. I get that. And you got to understand, I have been a lifelong Chiefs fan because I'm from Kansas City and Columbia, so I have to rub it in everybody else's face a little bit. Do you know how frustrating it's been to be a Chiefs fan all my life? It has been frustrating, and I know some of you don't like the Chiefs, but listen, our quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, dude's awesome, okay? A couple of saved people. He is a Christian, okay? He gives like half of his salary away to kids in the foster system. First and foremost, he's a Christian. So you're going to be with him in eternity, or maybe you won't. I don't know. But still, I can tell we're all starting off on the right foot together. Anyways, I said my name is Caleb. I'm a pastor at a place called Shepherd Church, Shepherd of the Hills, down in the Los Angeles area. I'm also an author, and I work with churches, and I'm friends with people like the Jasons here, Kane and Crow, and so on. So I'm just so happy to be with you guys today. And I want to start off saying this, and hopefully you are 100% cool with this. And I think you'll be on the same page, but I'm going to say it anyway, okay? How you talk to your kids about sexuality matters. Let me say this again, and I know some of you don't have kids yet, and you're like, oh, I don't have kids, so I can tune out of this. No, you might reproduce one day. And even if you don't, you probably have nieces, nephews, you probably have maybe you have grandkids, maybe you have friends, kids that you're friends with in a non-creepy way. But how you talk to your children about sexuality matters. When you talk to your kids about sexuality matters. Because if you don't, you can be sure that somebody else is. How you talk to your kids about sexuality matters, and you taking responsibility for having these intentional conversations with your kids matters. And if you do not, you lose every single right to complain. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about from my life, okay? When I was 2 years old, my parents divorced, and both of them went into same-sex relationships. My dad was never in a monogamous relationship. He had several different friends that he was in a relationship with, but my mom was in a 22-year relationship with a psychologist named Vera. They moved to Kansas City. My dad stayed in Columbia, Missouri. My mom started teaching and working at UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City. They were activists. Joined the local board of directors for GLAAD when I was growing up in preschool, elementary age, middle school. My parents took me with them to bars and clubs and campouts and pride parades, and that was just what my world was. I went to activist events, and I grew up hating Christians. I remember one pride parade when I was in elementary school. I was marching in. At the end of it, there were all these so-called Christians, quote unquote, holding up signs saying, God hates you, no room for you. And when people from my mom's parade would try to talk to them, they would get sprayed with water and urine by these so-called believers. And I remember, and I saw this time and time again. I saw some Christians ignore their young sons dying of AIDS in the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. And they were doing it because they were taking a moral stand. There's a difference between taking a moral stand and being a moron. Big difference. And I thought to myself, here's what I thought. I never want to be a Christian. Because if Christians are this bad, I can't imagine how awful Jesus Christ must be. I think we really underestimate how much our attitude and our actions and our words impacts what other people think about Jesus, especially our kids, especially our grandkids. When they see you one way around people or on the weekends and another way at home, that impacts them. Kids are watching a lot more than what you and I realize. I have two of them. I have a son who's 14 who still thinks he's invincible. So I'm like, man, I remember that. And then life happened. My daughter's 12, going on 19. It's annoying. So, when I was 16, I got invited to go to this Bible study to learn about the Bible. And I thought, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to go and be a pretend Christian. I'm going to be a ninja Christian. Learn about the Bible and dismantle it. And you can tell that worked out real well. It was a great plan. I showed up, and these people, and if this describes your house, I'm not insulting your house. More power to you if this describes your house. But it looked like these people had raided a Bible bookstore. Like they had picked it up and dropped it. And as a 16-year-old, unbelieving kid, unchurched student, I walked in, and they had the Bible bookstore frame pictures on the wall. And I thought to myself, why do these people have frame pictures of sheep and a lion with Bible verses? I'd never been in a house where somebody had a framed picture of an animal they didn't own. Like if you turn Christian, do you have to get a sheep picture? And then somebody came up from the basement and said, we're circled up downstairs. Why don't you come down and join us? And I'm thinking, well, this is how a horror movie begins. Like, I'm not even past the credits yet, and I'm going to get taken out. And we go down there, and everybody's reading from, 1 Corinthians, and I can't find it. I know God put a table of contents in there, so I read a verse from, 1 Chronicles about some dude getting impaled. And they're like, where are you? And I said, oh, well, I'm in 1 Chronicles. And it said, oh, you're in the Old Testament. And I was like, is there a new one? Is there updated 2.0? And the more that I went, the more that I realized that really that Jesus had very deep theological convictions. He had very real expectations, for how his followers should live and treat other people. But he also had personal and authentic relationships with people that were nothing like him, with people that the religious elite of his day would have nothing to do with. And I was like, I can get on board with Jesus. I don't want a sheep picture, but I can get on board with Jesus. And then, so I started studying what the Bible has to say about sexuality and relationships and marriage and so on. And I came to two conclusions that I still hold today. The first one is that I believe that God designed sexual intimacy and affection to be expressed in a marriage between one man and one woman. But I also believe that biblical beliefs should never be the basis for devaluing another human being. That your biblical beliefs, if anything else, should cause you to love people more relentlessly than anything else. And so then I ended up turning Christian, got baptized, thought my parents knowing it. Then I had to tell my parents, and I was a 16-year-old coming out as a Christian to my 3 activist gay parents. And their response was to kick me out of the house. Because they said, and don't feel guilty if you laughed, it is funny. But seriously, when I talk to students about this, they're like, man, I thought that only happened to, gay kids. And I'm like, no, okay? It happens to everybody. You know why? You know who does that? It's not just conservative Christian parents. It's Homo sapiens. People. That's a biological term for people, by the way, people, okay? We all do that when we respond with fear. And the number one reason why some of us are not talking to our kids about sexuality is because we are fearful. When the Bible says, fear 2 things, God and nothing. And yet we're fearful. Maybe we're fearful because of how we lived in the past and the choices we made. Maybe we're fearful because of just life in general. Maybe we're fearful because, we don't know what to say, or we're afraid of the questions that they're going to ask. You know what? One of the best answers you can give to somebody when you don't know something is, I don't know. Try it. I use it all the time as a pastor. Well, what about this in the Bible? I don't know. Next question. Maybe I'd say I'll help you find the answer. But I'm not going to sit there and look like a moron and just start spewing stuff. Everybody knows you're not saying anything when you do that. But at least you're being real. You see, I wish that my parents had really taught me about sexuality, because even my parents, for how adamant they were about sexuality, they never talked to me about sexuality, never, ever. And we have this image of people on the other side, whatever that means, like, people that are not Christian or are in relationships that maybe are different than what we're in, and we think, well, they're telling their kids to be like this and this and this. And no, not really. Not any different than most Christian parents when it comes to sexuality. Well, they make it political. Yeah, it's different in the home, though, isn't it? Very different. How you talk to your kids about sexuality matters. Okay? There are a few things I want to encourage you to do. And if you don't have kids yet, you may, and you know kids, so hopefully this will help you, okay? First and foremost, you have to realize what phase of life they're in. You want to write this down, you can. You don't want to, that's fine. You have to realize what phase of life they're in. Because you as a parent, you have to correspond with their phases. They have different phases. They're in preschool. You are more like, a caretaker. Elementary school, you're definitely more like a teacher. When they're in middle school, you're definitely a teacher, and kind of like, just a supervisor. And then they smell weird and they're funky. And then they get into high school and they have a lot of questions. And you become more of a guide and a coach. And then they're out of high school and you celebrate. And right here, you're now more of a coach and a mentor and a friend. But there are some of us in here, we are still treating our high schoolers the way we did when they were in elementary school. You can't do that and expect them to respond well. You've got to realize what phase they're in. Like, for instance, middle schoolers. Like, I love, middle schoolers. I really do. One of the best way to connect with them, especially when it comes to learning about the Bible, help them to have really good experiences. Because memories are really important. They want to know who are their friends and who likes them and do they matter. You got to realize what phase of life they're in. Second thing you got to do is you got to listen. You got to listen to what they're saying. Your kid comes out to you, or your kid's asking you questions about sexuality. Your kid is like, I'm being taught this in school. Usually we get defensive. We're like, okay, no, that's just wrong. Trump and Biden, Clinton, Abraham Lincoln. It's like, no. They're like, what are you talking about, dude? What are you talking about? You've got to listen. And the only way you can listen is to be a safe place for your kids to go to. You got to listen. And you want to create an environment where they do not feel like their identity in Christ is competing with their sexuality. And when we get demonstrative and we start getting upset, we're like, why are you asking that? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? We start creating an environment where they're not going to want to tell you anything. Like, they're worried about what might happen if they say the wrong thing, if you do something, if they do something, if they say the wrong thing, they're like, okay, they're going to flip out, and I can't have them flip out. So you have to listen as much as you can. The other thing is, be honest about what you believe. If they ask you, be honest. But here's the other thing I want you to do. Ask them questions. Learn to ask them questions. I've learned this as a pastor throughout the years. Christian leaders are not the best at asking questions. My wife is a therapist. She used to be an elementary school teacher, and then she met me. Now she's a therapist. Obviously, I told her, you don't need to do your 3,000 hours. Just take a picture and send it to the psychological board. They'll be like, oh, my gosh, you'd give her a doctorate. But seriously, we have to be in an environment where we ask questions. Ask them questions, okay? Please ask them questions. You need to learn how to ask really good questions. Because here's what we usually do. How was your day? It was good. What did you learn in school? Yeah, nothing. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad we connected. What? You didn't connect? It's probably what you say every day. No. Say, hey, what was your favorite thing about today? What stood out? Was there anything that just didn't feel right today? You know? What was something that made today different? Ask them different questions. Get to know. If they believe things that you don't agree with, ask them why. Don't get mad at them. Learn and ask them why. Look, Jesus asked questions all the time. You can too. Real quick, last thing is this. I have several more things I could say, but I'm going to say this, okay? Here's the deal. Don't forget to set boundaries. You definitely still have to set, as long as they're like 18 or under, set boundaries. You got to. If they live in your house, set boundaries. But realize that you're also preparing them to make their own decisions. And you can't be controlling. You got to realize what phase they're in. Let me just finish my story real quick. My parents eventually let me back in the house, or their two houses, and I went to Bible college, got married to my wife. She is a muy caliente Latina, and in her wildest imagination, she had no clue that her knight in shining armor looked like a cross between Dr. Evil Gru, Uncle Fester, Truman Capote, right here. This is her eye candy. We had our kids. For a while, I preached in Dallas, Texas, because everybody's got to go to purgatory once. And while I was there, it's hostile. Mark Cuban's there, Jerry Jones. It's humid as all get out. It's flat. And the rattlesnakes are just, never mind. So, we're there. And then, my parents moved there to be close to our family. Both of them separately of each other. And then they're like, can we start attending the church you preach at? I'm like, yeah, but you know what I believe about? They're like, yeah. And the church really came around them, and the church loved them, and the church realized that there's a difference between acceptance and disagreement. That you are commanded by God to love everyone. You don't have to agree with everything everybody says, but you have to accept them. That doesn't mean you agree or affirm or approve. And when my parents were 69, 70, they gave their lives to Jesus Christ. And I think back on who they are now, back to then, and I just think to myself, man, how cool would it have been to be intentional? I don't care how old your kids are. You can start right now. You can start today by being intentional. How you talk to your kids about sexuality matters. Thank you.